For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Shotgun Spratling for instant analysis of USC's Thursday morning media availability on day 11 of spring camp. And just a reminder, Thursdays we can't see practice, so we got to get a wake-up call with safeties coach Craig Naivar and safety Isaiah pull him out. And Shotgun, the interesting part about these type of Zoom pressers is you get a window into the coach's personality, and we definitely got a window into Naivar's personality. He started the presser by saying, "Hey, we tell our players, turn on your Zoom cameras, make sure you're present." And so he made the reporters, or he at least tried to get the reporters to turn on their cameras. He called us out a little bit for our laziness, Shotgun.
Yeah, he said, "Turn your freaking screens on, guys." And he was joking a little bit, but I think it kind of lends to his personality. He's a guy that's very energetic, and we've heard a lot about the energy he brings into that defensive room, and you can see it a little bit on these Zoom calls and kind of getting that feeling from them. Even guys like Vic Soto don't necessarily come across that way on the Zoom because he's kind of laid back a little bit, and then on the field he's screaming. You're not necessarily screaming on them, but Craig Naivar's energy definitely comes across. Anytime that he's on the screen. I mean, he did say that, it's one of the positives of this COVID experience is that, these guys don't take for granted day 8, day 9, day 10. So he's been really excited about the spring overall and the fact that the players are bringing that energy too.
Yeah, and it seemed like Naivar was impressed with the physicality that the young players have been bringing to camp each day. And he credited Robert Steiner for the work that he did in the 8 weeks of USC strength and conditioning period. And he said that it gave them an edge coming in because they are essentially young high school players in their first camp. So that helped prepare them for what they were able to do this spring.
Yeah, he said it was really smart the way that Coach Helton kind of gave them a little bit of extra time maybe to do some conditioning and weight training just to be prepared because they were doing basically CrossFit training last year, intense outside rather than being able to get on the squat rack and actually put some weight up and be able to increase their strength and their body weight there. So they're looking at it a little bit differently. They've attacked things a little bit differently this spring, and they've been very excited about the results of the physicality that they've had so far and just being able to get those young guys out there because he said this is basically their senior year. The young guys from California, he said, those freshmen have come in and they should be playing their senior year of high school football. Instead, they skipped that. They went from junior year straight to freshman year, but he's been impressed with how well they've picked things up and, been able to make some big strides from when they got on campus in January through that conditioning period with Bobby Steiner and the boys out to halfway through camp now.
And speaking of the young safeties, it was again like what we saw with Dante Williams. We kind of got a list of how he thinks each player is doing. What do you have to say about each player? I know I'm putting you on the spot there, Shotgun.
Well, we got everybody except for Anthony Beavers. Forgot to
True.
ask about him. But Xavier Alford, he's a guy that he recruited at Texas from Shadow Creek High School in Houston, and said that his advantage was that he's a little bit more advanced, having had a year in a college program, and they know exactly what they're getting from him because he was a guy that they had already recruited previously. And it was interesting, and this is something that I mentioned before, but the recruits that they brought in between Xavier Alford and Keontae Ingram, this is a guy that helps them kind of fill in a gap because that 2020 recruiting class was so small as far as numbers. They didn't have any safeties in that group. So this guy kind of fills in the gap there, kind of counting backwards there. And, that they were able to do a little bit more with him because he has that experience and because he's familiar with what they do. So they're excited to have him. He said he's very smart, very instinctive, tough, hard-nosed, gives all those kind of qualities that you're looking for in a safety. And I think you're going to hear physicality talked about with pretty much everybody. I'd asked about Zamarian Gordon. He said that's one of the guys. Physicality stands out. He said that he picked up the playbook probably quicker than any of the young guys, so they're excited about that. IPM talking about him at nickel, talking about his leadership. He's the ability to move him around. They move guys around a little bit at different positions. And then Chase Williams, he said there's nothing solidified, but Chase has done a really good job of putting his foot out there to potentially take over one of those starting roles, especially with Talanoa being gone, and said he's done a lot of things that are similar to what Talanoa has done as far as the NFL interview process, where they're asking guys like Talanoa, hey, they give him a play and 10 minutes later want him to recite it. He said those are the type of things that Chase can do. He's got a really smart mind and can really attack things from the mental side, and said he's been taking a really nice step being a vocal leader in practice, something that Keely, you pointed out multiple times this spring.
It's true. And one of the things that we were curious about this spring is Isaiah Polamau's move to nickel. That was a development that happened after Max Williams went down with the ACL tear. We got to talk to both him and Craig Naivar about that move, and it seems like something that Isaiah Polamau is taking up as a challenge.
Yeah, he's taking it as a challenge because it's something that he has to, it just is going to increase his skill set. He said, I've got to work on my man coverage. So, that's something that I'm looking at in this. But they talked about how it's not necessarily this completely separate position. He said that they need to know, all the players need to know all three of them. And, I asked about just the nickel position overall. And, Craig Naivar said that they've got to be able to have, guys know the weaknesses of every defense. So you need to be able to know, okay, what's the weakness of this defense as a safety so that you can can cover up for it if you need to, or, to be able to, be able to cover for someone else, whatever it may be. You have to learn the weakness of the concept and be able to know that. So they want them to know all three safety spots. When they teach the defensive package, they don't just learn one position, they learn all three of them. And so IPM making this move, while it's different for him, he's got some different movements in it. He said this is good for him because he's going to be a guy that's going to be calling out a lot of the plays as a safety as well. So he needs to know, each of the different positions. So IPM's taking it as a challenge to try to, fill in that role, but don't expect it necessarily to be permanent. And that's kind of the takeaway I had from listening to both the guys, that it's something they're putting out there. And Naivar said, if this needs to happen, now we've got it in our bag, basically. We've been able to do this. And it's something he said that they would like to do with all the positions and all the young guys, but they just don't have the depth right now. He said, usually in the spring, you're going to have the last couple of weeks, you're going to mix and match and move guys around so that they have a better chance to do that. And necessarily they're not able to do that. He said, they're one guy going down from being, shy of being able to fill out a 2 deep depth chart in that secondary. So I think it's something that they want to see those guys move around, and you get a feel for, okay, maybe this guy does look a little bit better here. We didn't expect that. So that's kind of the age old thing of moving guys around just to try it out and see. And sometimes you find something that you really like, and other times it's just, okay, now they have that experience. If we're in a pinch and suddenly 2 guys go down and you're in a situation like they are this spring where Greg Johnson's out and then Max Williams is lost for the season, now you can throw someone else in there and they have some comfortability with it instead of trying to learn on the job in the middle of the season.
Mm-hmm. Craig Naivar is known as one of the energetic recruiters on USC's staff, and he was asked about the upcoming into the recruiting dead period, and he kind of compared it to a month out from Christmas. Shotgun.
Yeah, he said it feels like November 25th right now. And it's like, what happens on November 25th?
Yeah.
He's like, and December 25th is about a month away. So he's excited to get back out on the road. And he likes building those relationships. And also one of the things he noted is, he hasn't been able to build those type of relationship with the coaches by going to practice and seeing the drills that they do. And he said, you're always learning as a coach. You always, there's coaching is coaching at every level. So you're always looking to pick up something, and maybe it's a drill, maybe it's a technique, a way that a coach is coaching something, except he's looking forward to getting those. But you also learn a lot more about players when you can meet them face to face. You can see how they interact with their teammates. And I asked him about Zamarion Gordon. He said he's wired the right way as far as football smarts. And I followed up on that. How do you tell when a guy's wired the right way, especially now, when they've been recruiting guys and, you're learning over Zoom. And he said, you gotta have that one-on-one conversation with them. It's similar to, what we mentioned with Talanoa, where the NFL executives are saying, they're going over a play or throwing something at him and coming back to it a little bit later. You got to see, does the guy have the intelligence there to be able to decipher things and be able to remember and be able to throw, whatever you throw at him. If you throw out a play in the middle of a game, are they going to be able to remember it for the next drive, or is it going to be gone? You got to teach it to them again, type of thing. So he said, getting a sense of guys, but he says one of the things he always asks players is, can you live without football? That's an interesting question. But he says, if they say yes, he just moves on. Oh, you can live without football? Okay, well, then you're not the type of guy I want, because he said you've got to be heavily invested because they get 20 hours of work with them and that's it. So the players need to take the time to be invested in learning about football, learning about their position, watching film, all those things that happen outside of the 20 hours in the practice field. That's what you need to be an elite player, and that's what he's looking for. So I thought that was really interesting that he pointed that out, the way that he's looking for players to be wired, and the fact that if they don't love football, they can't live without it. Yeah, they're not for him.
And speaking of Talanoa, one like you mentioned, it was interesting that Naivar is getting feedback from NFL execs that Talanoa is doing well in his interviews. But also, he was asked, "How do you make up for losing a guy like Talanoa? And if Todd Orlando's defense needs to be shifted because of it, what do you have to say?"
Yeah, he said that it's very multiple, and that's the unique thing about Todd Orlando's defense is the fact that it's not pigeonholed, and you can play to its strengths. So you don't ask a young guy to come in and if you got a safety that's a Taylor Mays, a hard hitting safety, you don't ask him to do what Talanoa Hufanga does. And the same thing with Talanoa Hufanga, you don't ask him to do what Taylor Mays did, as a top end, come down straight, straight line speed, hitting guys. That's not the type of player he is. He said instead, okay, how can we mold this defense a little bit and get the best out of each player? That's what you love to hear about something. You want to have particular types of players that really fit well into your system, but you want to be able to adapt and mold that system and make some tweaks that will really accentuate what they're able to do rather than saying, okay, we need you to do this. Can you do this? And if they can't, kind of throwing guys to the curb, if you think back, there's been a couple of recruits at USC think, oh man, this guy's going to be really good. He doesn't really fit in the USC system. How are they going to use him? And they kind of fell through the cracks. So you feel a lot more positive about a system like that it's going to find a way to best utilize each player rather than some guys where you want to see them do well because we get to know these kids through recruiting and stuff, and you hope for the best for all of them. And if they just get stuck on the bench and they're not getting an opportunity because they don't exactly fit in the system, it gets kind of disappointing. So it's a really positive development. I think that you're trying to find the best way to utilize each player rather than trying to find just the players that will fit into your system.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, Shotgun. Any final thoughts from this media availability before we wrap it up?
One interesting thing it was, being asked about the young safeties, but also the young quarterbacks. And Craig Naivar said, we've thrown everything at them. We haven't. Vanilla isn't fun, basically, is what he said. Being bland's not fun. So he said we've thrown everything at them, and they've taken it in stride. And the same thing with the safeties. He said that all three of those freshmen and Xavier Alfred coming in, that they've been able to pick everything up, and they've been very impressed that they've been able to jump right in. They haven't had to water anything down for them, on the offensive side or the defensive side for the young safeties, for the young quarterbacks. They're just going at it the way they normally would. So I think that's a positive sign for those young guys.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up for USC's Thursday morning media availability. For Shotgun Spratling, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.